The Mother's Love by Hans Christian Andersen. It was a very sad day, and every heart in the house felt the deepest grief for the youngest child, a boy of 4 years old. The joint hope of his parents was dead. 2 daughters, the elder of whom was going to be confirmed, still remained. They were both good, charming girls, but the lost child always seems the dearest, and when it is the youngest and a son, it makes the trial still more heavy. The sisters mourned as young hearts can mourn, and were especially grieved at the sight of her parents' sorrow. The father's heart was bowed down, but the mother sunk completely under deep grief. Day and night she had attended to the sick child, nursing and carrying it in her bosom as a part of herself. She could not realize the fact that her child was dead and must be laid in a coffin to rest on the ground. She thought God could not take a darling little one from her, and when it did happen, notwithstanding her hopes and her belief, and there could be no more doubt on the subject, she said in fresh agony, God does not know it. He has hard-hearted, mistering spirits on earth, who do according to their own will, and heed not the mother's prayers. Thus in a great grief, she fell away from her fate and God, and dark thoughts arose in her mind respecting death and the future state. She tried to believe that man was but dust, and that with this life all existence ended. But these doubts were no support to her, nothing on which she could rest, and she sank into the fathomless depths of despair. In her darkest hours she ceased to weep, and thought not of the young daughters who were still left to her. The tears of her husband fell on her forehead, but she took no notice of him. Her thoughts were with her dead child. Her whole existence seemed wrapping up in the remembrance of her little one and of every innocent word it had uttered. The day of the little child's funeral will come. For nights previously the mother had not slept, but in the morning twilight of this day she sunk from weariness into a deep sleep. In the meantime the coffin was carried into a distant room, and nailed down, that she might not hear the blows of the hammer. When she awoke and wanted to see her child, her husband with tears said, We have closed the coffin. It was necessary to do so. And God is so hard to me. How can I accept a man to be dead? She said with groans and tears. The coffin was carried to a grave, and the disconsolate mother sat with her young daughters. She looked at them, but she saw them not, for her thoughts were far away from the domestic heart. She gave herself up to grief, and it tossed her to and fro, as the sea tosses a ship without compass and rudder. So the day of the funeral passed away, and similar days followed of dark, wearisome pain. With tearful eyes and mournful glances, the sorrowful daughters and the afflicted husband looked upon her, who would not hear their words of comfort, and indeed what comforting words could we speak when we were themselves so full of grief? It seemed as if she would never again know to sleep, and yet it would have been her best friend, one who would have strengthened her body and brought peace into her soul. Way at last pursued her to lie down, and when she would lie as still as if she slept. One night, when her husband listened, as he often did, to her breathing, he quite believed that she had at length found rest in relief and sleep. He folded his arms and prayed, and soon sunk himself into a healthful sleep. Therefore he did not notice when his wife arose, threw on her clothes, and glided silently from the house to go where her thoughts constantly lingered, to the grave of her child. She passed through the garden to a path across the field that led to the churchyard. No one saw her as she walked, nor did she see anyone, for her eyes were fixed upon the one object of her wanderings. It was a lovely starlight night in the beginning of September, and the air was mild and still. She entered the churchyard and stood by the little grave, which looked like a large nosegay of fragrant flowers. She sat down and bent her head low over the grave, as if she could see her child through the earth that covered him, her little boy, whose smile was so vividly before her, and the gentle expression of whose eyes, even on a sick-bed, she could not forget. How full of meaning that glance had been as she leaned over him, holding in here the pale hand which she had no longer strength to raise. as she had sat by his little cot, so now she sat by his grave, and here she could weep freely, and her tears fell upon it. "Thou wouldst gladly go down and be with the child," said a voice quite close to her, a voice which sounded so deep and clear that it went to her heart. She looked up, and by her side stood a man wrapped in a black cloak, with a hood close drawn over his face, but her keen glass could distinguish the face under the hood. It was stern, yet awake confidence, and the eyes beamed with youthful radiance. "Down to my child," she repeated, and tones of despair and travail sounded in the words. "They vow to follow me. Ask her from. I am deaf." She bowed her head in token of assent, when suddenly it appeared as if all the stars were shining with the radiance of a full moon on the many-colored flowers that decked the grave. The earth that covered it was drawn black like a floating drapery. She sunk down, and the spectre covered her with a black cloak. Night closed around her, the night of death. She sank deeper than the spade of the sexton could penetrate, till the churchyard became a groove above her. And her cloak was removed, and she found herself in a large hall of bright spreading dimensions, and where was a subdued light like twilight reigning in the moment the child appeared before her, smiling and more beautiful than ever before. With a silent cry she pressed him to her heart. A glorious strain of music sounded, no distant, no near. Never had she listened to such tones as these. They came from beyond a large dark curtain which separated the regions of death from the land of eternity. "My sweet, darling mother," she heard the child say. It was a well-known, beloved voice, and kiss followed kiss, and boundless delight, when the child pointed to the dark curtain. "There is nothing so beautiful on earth. It is here. Mother, do you not see them all? Oh, it is happiness indeed." But the mother saw nothing of what the child pointed out, only the dark curtain. She looked with earthly eyes, and could not see as the child saw, he whom God had called to be with himself. She could hear the sound of music, but the heart, not the words in which she was to trust. "I can fly now, mother," said the child. "I can fly with other happy children into the presence of the Almighty. I will fain fly away now, but if you weep for me as you are weeping now, you may never see me again. Yet I would go so gladly. May I not fly away? You will come to me soon, will you not, dear mother?" "Oh, stay, stay," implored the mother. "Only one moment more, only once more, that I may look upon thee, and kiss thee, and press thee to my heart." And she kissed and fondled her child. Suddenly her name was called from above. What could it mean? A name uttered in a plaintive voice. "Yes, father," said the child. "It is my father who calls thee." And in a few moments deep sighs were heard, as of children weeping. "Where are my sisters?" said the child. "Mother, surely you have not forgotten them." And when she remembered those she had left behind, and a great terror came over her, she looked around her at the dark night. Dim forms flitted by. She seemed to recognize some of them as they floated through the region of death towards the dark curtain, where they vanished. Would her husband and her daughters thus flit past? No, where sighs and lamentations still sounded from above, and she had nearly forgotten them for the sake of him who was dead. "Mother, now the bells of heaven are ringing," said the child. "Mother, the sun is going to rise." An overpowering light streamed in upon her. The child had vanished, and she was being borne abroad. All around her became cold. She lifted her head and saw that she was lying in the churchyard, on the grave of her child. The Lord, in a dream, had been a guide to her fate and a light to her spirit. She bowed her knees and prayed for forgiveness. She had wished to keep back a soul from its immortal flight. She had forgotten her duties towards the living who were left her. And when she had offered this prayer, her heart felt lighter. The sun burst forth over her head, and a little bird carried a song, and the church bells sounded for the early service. Everything around her seemed holy, and her heart was chastened. She acknowledged the goodness of God. She acknowledged the duty she had to perform, and again she returned home. She bent over her husband, who still slept. Her warm, devoted kiss awakened him, and words of heartfelt love fell from the lips of both. Now she was gentle and strong as a wife can be, and from her lips came words of faith. Whatever he does, it right and best. When her husband asked, whence has woe all at once derived such strength and comforting faith? And as she kissed him and the children, she said, it came from God, from my child in the grave.